Utrecht was a city of quiet canals and bicycles leaning against narrow brick houses. The morning air carried the sound of church bells and the scent of fresh bread from nearby bakeries. On that morning, San Vandermeer, a curious girl with wide eyes, woke up to an unusual request from her mother. Dr. Marieke Vandermeer, a respected psychiatrist at the University Medical Center Utrecht, had no choice but to bring her daughter along to work. There was no neighbor available to watch San, and leaving her alone at home was unthinkable. As they cycled together through the cobbled streets, the hospital's tall modern building rose in the distance. San's stomach twisted with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never been inside the psychiatric wing before. Her mother's voice was calm, yet firm. "Stay close to me, San. This is not like the places you know. Some people here are fragile, and some can be unpredictable." The sliding doors of the hospital opened with a low hum. The cool air inside felt sterile, filled with the faint smell of disinfectant. Nurses in white coats passed swiftly, carrying clipboards. Patients sat scattered in the waiting area, some silent, others murmuring to themselves. Sen clutched her small backpack and looked around, her heart racing. Everything seemed different, almost unreal. She felt as though she had stepped into another world, one that held both mystery and unease. Her mother placed her gently on a wooden chair near the reception desk. "I will only be gone for a few minutes. Promise me you will sit here and wait." Sen nodded, but her eyes kept wandering towards the long corridor ahead. The corridor stretched like a tunnel, white walls and dim lights guiding the way deeper into the unknown. Her mother disappeared through a heavy door, leaving San alone with her thoughts. The ticking of a wall clock grew louder, each second dragging longer than the last. A patient across the room stared at her without blinking, and she quickly looked away, her pulse quickening. Curiosity pressed on her chest like a secret calling. What lay beyond that corridor? What stories lived inside those locked rooms? Her small feet began to shuffle on the cold floor, inching closer to the forbidden path. San hesitated at the edge of the corridor. The hum of the fluorescent lights above flickered softly, and each sound of her footsteps echoed louder than she expected. The chairs of the waiting area faded behind her, leaving only the long, white passage that seemed to stretch endlessly. She walked slowly, brushing her fingertips along the smooth, painted wall. The air felt cooler here, and faint voices drifted from the rooms around her. Some sounded like whispers, others like muffled laughter, and once in a while there was a sudden cry that made her flinch. Her heart pounded. She told herself she was only exploring, that she would turn back at any moment. But the corridor invited her forward, like a secret that wanted to be discovered. On her left she passed a small open doorway. Inside, a man sat at a table, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He was staring at the ceiling, his lips moving without sound. When his eyes shifted and caught San's, she froze. His gaze was sharp, almost piercing, yet strangely empty at the same time. She hurried on, her breath quickening. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing the passage. Each step echoed louder. At the next turn she noticed a heavy metal door, half closed, with a square window at her eye level. Behind the glass, a woman with tangled hair sat on her bed. She was humming softly, her voice rising and falling like a broken lullaby. Slowly, the woman turned her head, and for a moment, their eyes met. The humming stopped. The woman smiled. It was not a comforting smile. San felt her legs weaken, but the curiosity burning inside her would not let her retreat. She pressed on, deeper into the maze of hallways, further away from the safety of the reception desk. And with each step, she could no longer hear the ticking clock of the waiting room. All that remained was the sound of her own heartbeat and the quiet murmur of unseen voices that seemed to follow her through the walls. The corridor bent to the right, and San found herself in front of a row of identical doors. Each one bore a small brass plate with numbers and a single narrow window at eye height. The silence here was heavier, almost suffocating. She stepped closer to one of the doors, pressing her ear gently against the cold surface. At first she heard nothing. Then, faintly, came the sound of pacing footsteps inside. back and forth, like a trapped animal. She pulled away quickly, her chest tight. Another door caught her attention. This one was slightly ajar. Against her better judgment, she nudged it open. Inside was a small room, bare except for a bed with white sheets tucked tightly at the corners. A woman sat upright on the mattress, her long fingers drumming slowly on her knees. The woman's head tilted as she looked directly at San. "You should not be here," she whispered. Her voice was soft but carried a strange weight, like it knew more than it should. San's throat went dry. She stepped back, but the woman leaned forward, her eyes widening, her whisper turning into a rasp. "They will find you." The door clicked shut with sudden force, though San had not touched it. The echo rang down the corridor, making her heart race. She turned quickly, afraid someone had heard, afraid someone or something was coming. The hall stretched endlessly ahead, each door hiding secrets she dared not uncover. Yet she kept moving forward, drawn by a strange compulsion. She wanted to find her way back, yet every step only carried her further from the familiar world she had left behind. Behind one of the closed doors, someone began to laugh. It was a laugh that started small but grew louder, sharper, until it filled the corridor like a jagged edge cutting through the silence. Sen clutched her backpack straps and hurried on, her pulse thundering in her ears. And somewhere, deep in the building, a door slammed shut. San's small footsteps carried her further until the corridor opened into a dim common room. The ceiling lights flickered, and the smell of disinfectant was stronger here. Old magazines were scattered across a table, and 2 wheelchairs sat empty near the wall. In the far corner, a man was seated alone. He looked older than her mother, with a sharp jaw and gray stubble on his cheeks. His hospital gown hung loosely from his frame, and his hands trembled slightly as he traced invisible lines on the tabletop. When San entered, his head rose with unnatural speed. His eyes fixed on her, glinting with something between amusement and warning. "You are lost," he said quietly, his Dutch accent heavy but his English clear. "Lost in a place where doors remember more than people do." San froze. She had not expected him to speak. The man gestured for her to come closer. Against her better judgment, she did. His gaze never left her. "You must count the doors," he whispered. "Count them, or you will never find your way back. 11 to the left, 9 to the right. But beware of the one that does not breathe." His words made no sense, yet they carved themselves deep into her mind. San wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, he began to laugh softly, rocking back and forth as though amused by a private joke. She stepped away, her skin prickling. The laughter followed her as she backed into the corridor once more. The man's voice called after her, louder now. "They are watching you, little one. The walls have eyes." Her heart raced as she turned and hurried away. Every shadow along the hallway seemed sharper, every sound more threatening. The building no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a maze designed to hold secrets no child should ever discover. And in that moment, San realized she was far deeper inside than she had ever meant to go. The corridor narrowed again, leading San past another stretch of locked rooms. Each door had its own small window, and behind each pane of glass were shadows that moved unpredictably. She tried not to look, but curiosity tugged at her like a thread she could not cut. At one window, she saw a figure pressed close against the glass. A young woman with pale skin and wide, unblinking eyes. Her lips moved, though no sound came through. Sam leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. The woman mouthed words slowly, deliberately. 3 short phrases. Sen tried to make them out. The first looked like follow. The second was quiet. The third made her heart skip a beat. It looked like hide. She jumped back, almost tripping over her own shoes. The woman inside did not move. She simply stared, lips parted in a silent smile. San quickened her pace, but the feeling of being followed clung to her skin. The corridor ahead forked into 2 directions, both dimly lit. She hesitated, unsure which path led back to the reception. From the left hallway came the sound of footsteps. Slow, steady, dragging. From the right came whispers, rising and falling like wind through the trees. She turned right, clutching her backpack straps so tightly her fingers ached. The whispers grew clearer, yet she could not make out the words. They overlapped, like several voices speaking at once, all from behind the walls. The corridor ended at another heavy door. Its small window glowed faintly, as if a light was burning inside. San stepped closer, her curiosity battling with her fear. When she peered through the glass, she saw nothing but an empty room. Empty, yet the whispers grew louder, as though the voices were pouring out from within. She stumbled back, her breath sharp in her chest. And then, from behind her, the footsteps returned. The footsteps grew heavier, echoing against the walls like the beat of a slow drum. San froze, her back pressed to the cold door, eyes wide with terror. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to obey. At the far end of the corridor, a figure appeared. A tall man in a hospital gown, his head lowered, his arms hanging loose at his sides. His steps dragged across the floor, leaving a faint squeak with each movement. San held her breath. The man lifted his head, and she saw his eyes, dark, hollow, and fixed entirely on her. He spoke, his voice deep and cracked. "Children do not belong here." Her pulse thumped painfully in her chest. She took a step backward, but the door behind her was locked tight. The man's pace quickened, his movements jerky, unsteady, but unstoppable. Desperate, San darted into the nearest side corridor. Her shoes slapped against the linoleum floor, the sound betraying her every move. She could still hear the dragging steps behind her, uneven but relentless, echoing closer and closer. Turning a corner, she found another set of doors, these ones marked with numbers she did not recognize. Her lungs burned as she searched for a hiding place. At last she spotted a linen cupboard slightly ajar. She squeezed inside, pulling the door closed with trembling hands. The darkness was suffocating. She pressed her palm against her mouth to silence her breathing. Outside, the footsteps slowed. They stopped right in front of the cupboard. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came a low chuckle, rasping and broken, as though the man knew she was inside. The sound dragged on, scraping against her nerves until tears welled in her eyes. And then nothing. The footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. San waited, paralyzed by fear, her ears straining for the slightest sound. She did not dare open the door. She did not dare breathe too loudly. The hospital had become a labyrinth of shadows, and now she knew she was not wandering alone. San waited until the silence outside felt endless. At last she eased the cupboard door open, the hinges groaning faintly. The corridor was empty, but the air felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. She crept forward, one cautious step at a time, determined to find her way back. Yet the hospital no longer seemed to follow any order. Corridors branched off where she swore they had not been before. Signs were missing. Numbers on the doors blurred when she tried to focus on them. Her pulse quickened as she turned into a narrower hallway, darker than the rest. At the very end stood a single door. Unlike the others, it bore no brass plate, no number, no name. Its surface was plain and smooth, almost too clean, as if it had been hidden from time. Drawn by a mix of fear and fascination, San approached. The handle was cool beneath her fingers. She hesitated, but something inside urged her to open it. The door swung inward with surprising ease. Inside was a room unlike the others. No bed, no furniture. Just a single chair in the center, and on the chair, a small notebook. The walls were covered in faint scratches, like marks made by fingernails over and over again. San stepped closer to the chair, her eyes fixed on the notebook. Its cover was worn, corners frayed, as though it had been handled too many times. Slowly, she opened it. The pages were filled with drawings. Childlike sketches of faces, corridors, and doors. On one page was a picture of a girl with a backpack, her wide eyes captured in rough pencil lines. Beneath the drawing, in uneven handwriting, were 3 words. "We see you." San's breath caught. The notebook slipped from her hands, falling to the floor with a soft thud. At that exact moment, the door behind her slammed shut. The sound of the door slamming echoed like thunder through the bare room. Sen spun around, her chest tightening. The handle rattled uselessly in her grip. The door was locked. The air seemed to shift, colder now, carrying the faint scent of damp stone. The scratches on the walls appeared darker than before, like fresh wounds. Her eyes darted back to the notebook lying open on the floor. The page had changed. The sketch of the girl was no longer frozen in place. Now, in rough strokes, the figure of the girl was drawn standing inside the very room where San stood. Her breath trembled. She backed away, pressing herself against the wall. From somewhere beyond the walls came a murmur, low and continuous. It grew louder, multiplying into a chorus of voices. They whispered words she could not understand, their rhythm uneven, urgent, as though they were calling her name over and over. The ceiling light flickered violently. Shadows stretched across the scratched walls, twisting into distorted shapes. One shadow broke away from the rest, tall and thin, standing upright in the far corner of the room. San blinked, hoping it was only her imagination. But the shadow remained, unmoving yet watching. Her heart hammered as she clawed again at the locked door. The whispers rose, the shadow shifted, and suddenly a loud bang shook the walls, as though something had thrown itself against the other side of the door. She cried out, her voice swallowed by the chorus of whispers. The light flickered once more, then steadied. The shadow was gone. The notebook lay open at her feet, the page now blank. And then, as sudden as the door had locked, the handle turned. Slowly, with a groan, it opened inward. The door creaked open to reveal an empty corridor bathed in pale light. San hesitated, her legs trembling, before stepping out of the nameless room. The door closed behind her with a final click, and when she turned to look, it was gone. Where the door had been was now only a smooth, white wall. She gasped. The hospital was shifting, rearranging itself like a puzzle. Determined to escape, she pushed forward, quickening her pace. Yet every corridor seemed unfamiliar. Signs that should have pointed the way out were missing or scribbled over with black marker. Numbers on the doors flickered, changing when she blinked. At one junction, she thought she saw the reception desk ahead. Relief surged through her. But when she hurried closer, the hallway bent sharply, and the desk dissolved into another row of doors. Her eyes stung with frustrated tears. She whispered to herself, "Find the way. Just find the way." Then she heard it, her mother's voice. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Sand, where are you?" Her heart leapt. She called out, her voice breaking. "Mama, I'm here." She ran toward the sound, turning corner after corner, chasing the echo. But the voice seemed to slip further away each time, drawing her deeper into the labyrinth. Finally, she stumbled into a wide hall she had never seen before. The ceiling stretched higher, and rows of tall windows lined one wall. Yet outside, instead of the Utrecht skyline, there was only darkness. No city, no lights, just an endless black void pressing against the glass. Her mother's voice came again, louder now, but this time it was wrong. The tone was strained, distorted, almost mocking. "Sand, come closer." Her skin crawled. Something in her instinct screamed that it was not her mother at all. Still, the voice grew louder, pulling her toward the center of the hall. And then the windows began to rattle, as though something outside in the darkness wanted to get in. The windows shuddered violently, the glass bending as if an invisible weight pressed against it. Sen covered her ears, her heart pounding like a drum. The distorted voice called again, closer now, echoing across the hall. She backed away, desperate to escape, when a sudden beam of light cut through the shadows. A torchlight. "San." It was her mother's voice, real this time, urgent and trembling. From the far end of the hall, Dr. Marieke Vandermeer appeared, flanked by two nurses. Her face was pale with panic, but her eyes flooded with relief as they found her daughter. Sen stumbled forward, sobbing, as her mother rushed to her and wrapped her tightly in her arms. The nurses glanced around the hall, their expressions uneasy. "This area is supposed to be locked," one muttered under his breath. The rattling windows fell silent. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, leaving only the sterile scent of disinfectant. The hall seemed ordinary again, just another section of the hospital. Dr. Marique held San's face in her hands, her voice shaking. "Never wander here again, my love. This place is not for you." San buried her face in her mother's coat, too shaken to speak. She glanced once more at the windows, half expecting the darkness to press against the glass again. But there was nothing. Only her reflection stared back at her, pale and wide-eyed. Hand in hand, they walked back through the corridors. This time, every turn led them closer to safety. The whispers faded, the shadows melted away, and the reception desk finally appeared, waiting like a familiar lighthouse at the end of a storm. Her mother never let go of her hand. Not for a single step. And San never looked back.